As you all know, numerous events over the past several years have relentlessly thrust issues related to intolerance and divisiveness back to the forefront of our public consciousness and our everyday lives. Colleges and universities, unfortunately, are not immune to these developments either. And unfortunately, recent incidents have demonstrated in vivid fashion the detrimental impacts that incivility can have, even in spaces that have traditionally been beacons for free expression, fostering critical thinking and debate and activism. UC San Diego remains steadfast in our commitment to advancing positive social innovation and developing future generations of changemakers. The world needs changemakers to build a positive future. And so we jointly launched the Applied Research Center for Civility in 2021 to bring together the research engine of UC San Diego with the hands-on expertise of the National Conflict Resolution Center. And together, we are trying to change the public discourse and to drive the identification of practical solutions and their adoption. And we look forward to continuing to partner on research into the dynamics of society's most pressing issues and to inform new approaches to actually addressing them and changing things for the better. There's a lot of work to be done in these spaces, and we each play a critical role in supporting these efforts, which is why it's so wonderful that each of you are here to be part of these efforts and part of building a set of new approaches. And seeing so many of you involved in these important conversations gives me hope that we will be able to advance dimensions of civility in our communities locally, around the country, around the world.
Well, the National Conflict Resolution Center, we have, I must say, never been so busy. There is conflict in all facets of our lives, at all levels of society, in the community, in the workplace, in government. And we're doing our best to provide the skills and the strategies to help people navigate through these conflicts. We provide mediation services and culture, communication, and conflict resolution training to companies, to universities, to school districts, government agencies. We're just so busy doing this work. But I must say that our focus on higher education is really amongst our biggest passion. We spend our time sometimes working in companies teaching communication skills to adults in the workplace. And I'm starting to think, like, why? Why are we teaching these like fundamental skills of communication to senior managers and supervisors? It doesn't really make any sense. We have to teach our younger generation. You know, that's what you're all about in the colleges and the universities. They are the next generation. We're only going to succeed as a nation, as a society, if the next generation is equipped with the skills and the talents and the strategies to be able to have a collaborative conversation, to be able to work with someone who maybe disagrees with themselves, with someone else. And I was thinking it was it was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I met with a president of a university. And we are the Conflict Resolution Center. So I said to him, you know, we have this conflict resolution strategy. You know, can we come into your university and teach your students this conflict resolution strategy? And he kind of paused for a second and said, yes, we do have conflict on our campus. But what's even more salient is that we're so divided. We have so many different clubs and fraternities and sororities and 600. And everyone are in these clubs and they stay within their club. They just talk to the students that look like themselves. They're afraid to turn and talk to someone that might look a little different than themselves, let alone have a conversation with someone with a different perspective. They can't have a different perspective and have that conversation in a respectful manner. So please come into our university, he said, and teach my students how to have a conversation across differences. So our training team launched the Art of Inclusive Communication, and we started training at that campus. Well, UC San Diego caught wind of that, and Elaine Gallinson funded the Gallinson Civility Project. And 10 years ago, since this point, we've trained over 12,000 students in the Art of Inclusive Communication at UC San Diego.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here today among individuals who are dedicated to cultivating the next generation of students with skills of deliberation, dialogue, discourse, and facilitation. I want to start off today by expressing thanks to the many individuals and organizations who were involved in bringing this work to life. First, thank you to Steve Dinkin from NCRC for his support for the project through the Applied Research Center for Civility. A big thank you also to the NCRC staff who made this conference possible. Holly Sullivan-Gonzalez, Miri Pinel-Cruz, Betty Omar, Kelly Duran, and the incredible NCRC facilitators. Yes, round of applause. I would also like to extend my thanks to Elaine Gallinson and Herb Solomon for their funding support for this work. In addition, I want to express gratitude to my colleagues at UCSD. First, thank you to Kelly Nielsen, my co-author on this project from the Center for Research and Evaluation. Thank you to the leadership at the Division of Extended Studies, Dean Hugo Villar, Josh Shapiro, and Georgia Kovacs. I am also appreciative of the support we have received from Executive Vice Chancellor Elizabeth Simmons. Our work also benefited greatly from the thoughtful insights and expertise from our Faculty Review Committee, Ken Stern, Christine Hoover, Becky Pettit, and Amy Binder. A special thank you to Amy for moderating our forthcoming discussion with Kelly. And finally, so many thank yous. I want to say thank you to the dozens of individuals across the country who spoke with us about their programming. Your passion, dedication, and commitment towards this work is palpable. And every conversation, I'm not exaggerating, left me feeling inspired and hopeful. I am grateful to these individuals and all of you in the room who are leading the charge on discourse programs during a time when they are needed more than ever. Before I begin, I want to call your attention to the QR code. If you have any questions at any point, please feel free to submit them, and they will be on every slide. In today's presentation, I'll first share with you our research goals and the methods we use to achieve them. I'll present to you the 5 key themes we identified for implementing and/or transforming a civil discourse program. Keep in mind, the version of the work you see today is a work in progress, and insights from you all and our panelists today will be used to complete the final product. After a few concluding thoughts, Kelly and I will sit down with Amy to go into detail about some of the findings and insights from our work, and we'll conclude with some Q&A from the audience. When we started this project, our goal was to understand how colleges and universities are preparing the next generation of leaders to go out into society and lead with civility and know how to dialogue across difference. To do so, we sought to map and understand the broad landscape of civil discourse programs. Understanding that these programs all take their own unique approach to the work, we included programs that teach civil discourse, dialogue, deliberation, facilitation, and civic leadership. Based on our conversations with program leaders, we aimed to identify the key decision-making components for those seeking to implement a new program or modify an existing effort. Finally, our goal was to compile a toolkit of best practices. We understand that many, if not all, colleges and universities will have some sort of dialogue or discourse initiative in place. Our hope is that you can use this report, assess what is happening in your particular landscape, and take steps to fill in the gaps towards creating a stronger culture and practice of civil discourse on your campus. Had did we accomplish this? We conducted 75 interviews over the course of a year. 53 of those were with staff and faculty at 40 universities and colleges. 15 individuals who work at third-party organizations that support and or implement programming on college campuses. We also distributed a survey to students who participated in discourse programming to understand skills learned and where and how they have been applied. This yielded 126 responses, and of those, we did 7 follow-up interviews. To understand the key decision-making components of this programming for campuses, we use the form of a star. The purpose of the star image is to show how the process of developing the style of programming is ongoing. There is no official start or end point. The process is iterative. Each component is of equal importance. And these components include deciding which skills of civil discourse to focus on, gaining a deep understanding of one's context, choosing the right program format for your campus context, deciding on whether or not to partner with a third-party organization, and of course, anticipating challenges that might arise. Before designing formats, choosing partners, or tailoring programs to campus contexts, university administrators should consider first which skills they would like to focus on with their programming. This acts as the anchor for intentional program design and ensures the work maintains a focus on skills that are transferable. Based on our interview, the skills that students learn from these programs can be grouped into 5 broad categories. The first is inward. It's personal growth and self-awareness, in which students develop skills of humility, empathy, and even optimism through practices of self-reflection. Moving outside of oneself are interpersonal communication skills, in which students learn to listen, talk, and relate to others. Thinking beyond the university, students can also gain applied professional skills, ranging from project management to stakeholder communication, all of which can be applied in their future professional and civic lives. Next, students will often get the chance to practice these skills in community settings, giving them an opportunity to develop a capacity and asset-based mindset for doing dialogue work outside of higher education. And finally, civil discourse programs are powerful incubators for leadership development, in which students learn to guide others through complexity and change. In our student survey, we ask students how often they apply the skills they learned across various settings. We found that across the board, students are taking these skills out of programs and putting them into practice in their day-to-day lives. 80% of respondents said they apply the skills either often or very often in the classroom. 74% have used them in discussions with friends and family, and 78% have incorporated them into professional settings. I'd like to highlight how these skills present themselves through the community-oriented programming at the Institute for Civic Discourse and Democracy at Kansas State University. Run by Dr. Colleen Lind, right there, Democracy is Us. Student participants will often go out into the community to facilitate forums on various topics. At an event gathering feedback from urban and minority-owned farmers in eastern Kansas, students were expecting to hear themes about environmental challenges. They had this expectation coming into the work. And they were incredibly surprised to hear about the forum participants' focus instead on much more practical matters, such as getting loans or technical assistance. This experience broadened their understanding of what it means to do community work, to listen to community members' perspectives first and foremost, and to approach conversations with empathy and understanding. This example was just one of many we heard where students got to not only practice their dialogue skills, but also gave them a realistic perspective on how these skills work in real-life settings. After honing in on skills, it is important to assess one's local campus context to gauge feasibility, interest, and placement. First and foremost, getting buy-in from university leaders can help initiatives progress more smoothly and unlock access to financial resources. Aligning programs with university missions and strategic plans is a helpful strategy for getting on the radar of university leaders. Next, placement of programs varies widely, and where a program is housed will translate to the style of programming, its reach, and availability of resources. These may be based within academic departments, more centrally located within the university, or standalone programs that are independent of academic departments or university administration. When staffing a program, we heard from participants that the ideal setup is to have programs be coordinated by both a faculty member and a staff member in order to maximize reach and balance responsibilities. When thinking about student participation, programs strive to recruit students across campus and will often appeal to students' professional goals when marketing their programming. And finally, campus partnerships can help to increase student attendance, build trust on campus, and amplify programmatic efforts. As an example of how leadership support can bolster efforts, we can look to Hiram College in Ohio, a small liberal arts school with just under 800 undergraduate students. The Garfield Center for Public Leadership's director was looking to partner with third-party organization Renew America to help facilitate dialogue programming for their students. Because of the close connection this faculty member had with the university's leadership, who offered his unwavering support, these efforts were able to get off the ground with ease. After the creation of this partnership, they established a cohort of 30 students, and this programming is now being woven into the entire undergraduate curriculum for all Hiram students. When assessing one's context and deciding where programming should be placed, it can be helpful to know more about why students choose to participate in this programming. In our survey, the top 3 reasons for participation were that students wanted to build leadership skills, improve communication skills, and engage with those who are different from them. Knowing this, program leaders can think strategically about where to place programs, maybe in communications departments, in leadership programs, and they can also ensure that students get structured opportunities to engage with those who are different from them. Civil discourse programs take many different forms. In our report, we identify 5 different approaches, which may not even be exhaustive of all the types out there. These include cohorts of select groups of students, course-based models that teach these skills to students in a curricular setting, embedded courses that are housed within departments and are affiliated with centers, campus-wide events for the broader campus community, and faculty fellowships to support faculty members into embedding dialogue in the academic core. While some campuses may choose to focus their efforts on one specific approach with a particular group, others may prefer to do multiple programs or appeal to the entire campus community. And in a few minutes, I'll pose a poll to you all about what kind of programming you think would work best in your campus context. At the University of Pennsylvania, the SNF Padilla program has implemented several of these programs. They run a multi-year cohort program that lasts 3 years, in which students get to not only practice these skills on an ongoing and long-term basis, but also develop lifelong friendships. There are 50 Padilla designated courses across the undergraduate curriculum offered every year that are open to all students. They have dialogue at the core of their programming and can be found in myriad disciplines, including biology, engineering, and history. They also support faculty members through funding, dialogue resources, and a community of practice for instructors. Much of this wraparound effort is made possible because of the program's literal and figurative placement at the center of campus in the provost's office. We understand that this kind of reach takes a lot of resources to achieve. While this program receives support from the SNF Foundation, others may have to make more strategic choices when doing this work. We do hope, however, that hearing about this program and others can provide a model for those looking to do similar work. All right, I'll take a break from speaking, and I'd love to hear from you all now. If you go to the QR code there, it should log you in, or you should just pop up directly the Mentimeter slide. Based on your understanding of your local context, what style of programming do you think would work best? This could be programming you have in place, programming you think would be achievable, or what style of programming you think you yourself would want to take part in as a participant. So we'll take just a minute here and reconvene as a group. Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. I love the enthusiasm for wraparound efforts. We'll be hearing in a few minutes from Maya Ferdman from UCLA, who will talk about how they kind of combine all these programs into a repository on their campus. In our report, we highlight efforts from Davidson College and their Deliberative Citizenship Initiative, where they do a lot of this wraparound work as well. So I encourage you to find Graham Bullock at some point today to chat. And I'm glad to hear that people are also a big fan of cohorts. Moving on, our report details the key decision-making points university leaders should consider when deciding whether or not to partner with third-party organizations. These partnerships offer a wide range of benefits, from ready-made resources and professional facilitation training to institutional capacity building and cultural transformation. As campuses explore how to incorporate dialogue programming into their contexts, external organizations can provide not only content expertise, but also infrastructure, legitimacy, and ongoing support. University leaders should, however, evaluate the necessity of third-party partnerships in light of their campus's specific needs and internal capacity. There could be instances when some organizational programs are not aligned with a campus's culture, or costs may be prohibitive to do true transformational work on campus. By assessing the wide array of programs available, leaders can make the choice for if and what type of partnership best fits their campus community. And later today, you'll hear from a panel of third-party experts who will go into more detail about the rationale for partnering with third-party organizations and what these collaborations look like in practice. And finally, while civil discourse programs hold great promise for fostering meaningful dialogue and personal growth on college campuses, they are not without their challenges. And just a little side note, the next one is also a poll. So think about what challenges you have faced on your campus. Program leaders share challenges about how to quantify success in a field that is all about deep change that takes place over time. Interviewees also discuss structural challenges like student hunger and homelessness, both of which are on the rise, that inhibits student participation. This is made even more complicated during the age of Netflix and TikTok that pull on students' attention. In addition, there's the difficulty of convincing university leadership of program worthiness. These challenges are compounded by staffing shortages and financial predicaments that pose stress on long-term sustainability. And finally, the field itself exists within an increasingly polarized landscape where even the intent to foster respectful dialogue is often met with skepticism. Despite these challenges, the individuals who lead these programs find creative workarounds and solutions. Whether it is offering food to encourage student attendance, framing their work in alternative language, or using advisory boards in lieu of staff, these programs demonstrate remarkable adaptability. They find ways to sustain student involvements and grow their programs despite the hurdles in their way. I told you there was another poll. I'd love to hear what is top of mind for you all for challenges you have experienced or would anticipate experiencing in a campus community. And this one's open-ended, so be honest. I outlined quite a few on the last slide, so you're welcome to type in which of the options I shared that's most relevant for you, or something else that's specific to your context. And we'll take just another minute here. I think we'll pause it there for now. Interesting about student engagement, that certainly is a topic that we talk about in the report and will come up in our conversation with Amy as well. Student interest, engaging all students, student engagement. We have a session later today on measuring impact from Renee Heath at the University of New Hampshire to discuss these issues. Sustainability is definitely an ongoing no jokes intended, conversation to be had with university leaders as well. In a moment marked by deep polarization and eroding trust in institutions, colleges and universities have a unique opportunity and responsibility to cultivate civil discourse as a cornerstone of democratic life. Our report showcases a wide array of campus-based programs that aim to do just that, helping students build habits of listening, reflection, and meaningful exchange. I want to end with a common theme from interview participants, which was the importance of action over perfection. Programs do not need to be perfect to be making a difference. Rather than waiting for ideal conditions, interviewees encouraged others to launch a program, iterate as you go, and embrace uncertainty. The creativity and commitment of program leaders from this research offer a blueprint for what is possible. My hope is that these ideas continue to percolate throughout the day as individuals share what's worked, what hasn't worked, discover areas for collaboration, and build a community of practice for those dedicated to this programming. I'd like to introduce Amy Binder and Kelly Nielsen for a conversation about some of the key themes that emerged from our work. Amy Binder is SNF Agora Professor of Sociology at Johns Hopkins University. She's an award-winning author of 3 books, including most recently, The Channels of Student Activism, How the Left and Right Are Winning and Losing in Campus Politics. Kelly Nielsen is the director of the Center for Research and Evaluation, my co-author on this project, and is also the co-author of an award-winning book titled Broke: The Racial Consequences of Underfunding Public Universities. Welcome to you both.
Well, thank you, Karina, for your presentation. That was really terrific. And it is my true joy to be on the dais with Kelly and Karina today. I had the honor of educating this young pup when he was about a youngster at UCSD. I spent most of my career there, and Karina was also a graduate student in the department at UCSD in sociology. And it's just so wonderful to see what you've done with your lives. Very proud. So to get us started, the title of your excellent report is Building Collaborative Leaders, Teaching and Learning Dialogue on College Campuses. And I'd like to use the first couple of minutes of our time together to pick apart with some surgical precision of what you mean by not each of those words, but each of the phrases. So first, I want to know what you mean by dialogue. Some of these terms are obviously common phraseology, but you've used these terms very specifically, so I want to figure out what you mean by them. In some parts of the report, you refer to dialogue as practicing civility. In other parts, you refer to it as being civil to one another, while at other points in the report, you refer to it as productive discourse or intentional conversation. I love intentional conversation, by the way. Before we go any deeper into the guidelines, I wonder if one or both of you can just do a little bit of semiotics for us and tell us what you mean by this. So do you mean some sort of commitment to conversation or some kind of commitment to conversation in a particular way, a particular topic? What precisely do you mean?
Great. First, Amy, thank you. And you'll all forgive me if I revert into grad student dissertation defense mode. This is the first time I've been put to questions since then. I think so. This is great. And yeah, it's intentional. I think the questions that we had around language and how we're going to use the language and describe the work comes out of, in part, the, I guess, difficulties of using civility. And some people don't use it. You know, some people shy away from the language of civility. Others, think through, where civility emerges out of this process of dialogue and discourse and conversation. And so I think, we came to dialogue, one, sort of addressing those concerns. The other is that we talk to a lot of people who come out of, they're rhetoricians. They come out of communications departments. I don't think it's a big surprise that, Tim is sort of one of the really tremendous scholars in this world because he's got a philosophical grounding that he's coming through. And so we learned a lot from people who are thinking about what it means to dialogue in really, I think, deep and sophisticated ways. I'm not a rhetorician or a comm scholar, as you know, my mentor here. But we've really, I think, come to dialogue out of all those conversations as both a set of skills and a set of ends, right? And so the skills we're thinking in terms of active listening and self-reflection and really being aware of who you're communicating with. But then the ends of really trying to productively achieve something, whether that's understanding the person that you're speaking with, whether that's sort of understanding yourself in a much, I guess, more transformative way, which many of these programs really do achieve. And I think it's that language of intention. And Tim started that us off yesterday with putting intention at the forefront. So it's that intention to do something productive with others. It's a way of being with others. And so I think that end part comes out of dialogue in a way that it doesn't come out in the language of just civil discourse, which I think emerges from productive dialogue. If you're doing dialogue well, maybe this is too glib, but civility kind of takes care of itself because you're using those skills and you're sort of doing that towards certain ends. I think of our conversations with Roger Berkowitz, for instance, at Bard College. He's the director of the Hannah Arendt Center. And, he puts on all of these public conversations. This is a thing he does. And he brings very controversial people from across the political spectrum and he brings them together. And the dialogue that they do it has to be something that's done in good faith, right? You have to be there to listen to others and you have to be there to answer the questions that are put to you, right? You're not just there to be provocative, right? So it's not just a valorization of the most radical opinion or the most sort of controversial viewpoint. It's a practice of listening and answering and responding in good faith. And so that's what, coming from Hannah Arendt is thinking publicly is what he calls it, right? So it's public thinking. And I think dialogue is really a form of public thinking. So that's you can do that in a panel like this. You can do it, Providence College has like the dialogue walls where, people can go and they put their thoughts out there publicly and they do it in an intentional way, in a thoughtful way. But then, I like to see that so many people are interested in cohort models because there's something that gets achieved over time, right? You spend time and through that time, trust is built. Mm-hmm. And so students and their professors or whoever is leading a cohort model is able to build that trust. It allows for greater vulnerability to happen. And it's in that situation where people can really then use those skills and they can really try to pursue that collective, productive work. So I think that's how we ended up, I think with dialogue is really the core concept. And I think, as I said, out of that, I think civility comes.
Okay.
I'll bookend that part of the conversation. And we got a lot of pushback, understandably so and rightfully so, during our interviews about civility. People were like, we don't touch that term with a 10-foot pole. And I want to be clear that we don't maybe think of civility in like the traditional dictionary sense of it being polite. We think of it as a starting point for dialogue. And like Kelly said, kind of civility emerges from dialogue. And I might take a second to quote one of our interviewee participants. I hope he's in the room, Dr. Carl Luna from the University of San Diego. He said, civility is that which builds community. You have to speak truth to power. Civility is the bringing in and inclusion of everyone in the community for their benefit. So how we approached it in this research is thinking of very intentional space being created for a diverse set of viewpoints. And from that, all the skills of dialogue kind of fall into place.
Got it. Thank you. Moving to another part of your title, and this is the part about building collaborative leaders. Is your point about dialogue and civility, however we do or do not use that term specifically, is it to help people develop leadership positions for future political realm or, taking leadership positions in society, or is it more spread out democratized maybe than those kinds of identifiably leader-y positions.
So when we started this project, we wanted to identify leaders who could be leading us through our contentious political space. Where are the next John McCains in the world? Who are political leaders that can model good dialogue for people? And then we started these interviews and we did our survey. And we saw that leadership happens everywhere. It happens in classrooms, it happens in communities, it happens in workplaces, it happens around your family dinner table. I mean, that said, we don't want to dilute leadership to the point that it doesn't mean anything, but we found that when students learn these skills, they feel really empowered to step into spaces that require leadership skills. They know how to include marginalized voices. They know how to bridge divides. They know how to deal through conflict. There's just all these skills that they gain that make them feel like, okay, I can step into these leadership spaces. Now, that said, we still need political leaders out there who can model and practice good dialogue. But I think we believe that so much of that is built upon the foundation of individuals across the country who are leading with dialogue in their communities first and foremost.
All right. And still on the title, I'll get off it in a moment. But there's the final part about learning dialogue skills on college campuses. We're a bunch of university and college folks in the room. So it may seem really obvious to everybody in the room that college campuses make sense, but I think it's worth kind of having you draw out the reasons why you decided to study college campuses as the places to do this kind of dialogue work.
Yeah, and I think, Chancellor Mnookin, she really, I think, laid out the case for why universities, I think that makes, I could just sort of repeat that, but I think as a sociologist of higher education and having, looked at universities very closely, like this is the most wonderful opportunity. It came to us, I think, as a project because colleges and universities, campuses get disproportionate attention for a lot of the conflicts, the polarization, the, challenges of discourse, because it's, you have students who are very, often very vocal. You are bringing controversial topics and speakers together. So the campus is a focal point. It's also just sexy news, I guess. Like the newspapers love to focus on colleges and universities. So there was a motivation there to look at colleges and universities. But if you're thinking about actually teaching skills and transforming people, there is really no better place. I mean, there just isn't. For one, colleges and universities have a mission that explicitly supports the development of human beings and a democratic society and people who can communicate with one another well. Even in its research and knowledge dissemination mission, that depends on communication and dialogue and bringing a plurality of people together to do that work. So the mission itself is critical. In my own work, I've seen how like a sort of campus culture around a mission of a university can really drive the work that people do, or at least how they do it. And you're just not going to find that outside of the university system. I mean, I don't think there is another space where it exists in the same way. The other is just that there's a massive infrastructure, right? I mean, you have tremendous resources in many universities, not all, of course, but higher education is a massive infrastructure that brings those students into a space and gives them opportunities where dialogue can just become part and parcel of the course. I know you've talked to you as our advisory board member, you pushed us a lot to think about where is dialogue, where is civil discourse happening, where is it being taught in just the day-to-day educational process. And you can build it into a course. But you can also have entire year-long experiences where you're taking students into communities where they are learning to engage with others. You're not going to get that in any other institution, really, right?
So when you're thinking about colleges and universities, are you thinking about 18 to 22-year-olds? I mean, we know that colleges and universities actually have a lot of continuing ed people. So are you thinking of youthful people getting this intervention, or are you also thinking about older folks who might?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's this sense of like, it's great to get people when they're young and maybe in their formative years. I don't think so. I mean, I think that institution can support anyone to do this work. And we see it happening elsewhere. We see it in corporations. I mean, Steve already talked about the work that NCRC is doing. They're doing it with people in those spaces, but those spaces have different incentives. There's different motivations in a corporate space. That universities, while we might lament maybe a corporatization of the university, some of us might, but there's still a counter mission or one that's even primary to that particular mission. So no, I don't think it's about age. We also see the work that NCRC is doing in K-12 schools. And there's a lot of people who think this work needs to be done there. It's just really hard to do in K-12 schools. It's hard to do anything in K-12 schools, right? Like to change what it is that they're doing and change that educational mission. Universities are far more flexible. You have the experts, the rhetoricians, you have the capacity to work with third parties in a way that you can't do with younger populations. And so it's a special institution. I'm very critical in my other work about it, but in this case, I really can only sort of sing its praises.
Yeah, and in my own research, I have tracked just how incredibly formative universities are, and even universities that are in the same space, Research One universities, research-intensive universities, different campuses with different cultures. If it's a party school, big sports school versus a more elite private university, they end up forming different kinds of understandings of selves. I did some research on conservative college students a number of years ago, and just to see how ideological tenets can be the same across a couple of different campuses, but the way they inhabit politics and expression can be so very different depending on the culture and the organizational arrangements on campus. You know, you can really think about universities as being strongly formative in people's lives.
The other thing, I just want to add one more point.
Okay.
There's also few other spaces you get outside of colleges and universities where you get this individualized mentorship. You get an opportunity to mess up. You get an opportunity to practice. You get an opportunity to someone to tell you, you know what, let's rethink that. Let's take the exclamation point out of that sentence. And you might get a performance improvement plan at work if you maybe do some practices that you shouldn't be doing. But in colleges and universities, they're there and they're committed to actually helping you through those practices by messing up. And you might not get that elsewhere.
Right. And that's actually the problem of social media, right?
Yeah.
Is if you mess up once, it could go viral and that's horrible. But in a trusting environment, you hope that you can ameliorate that. Okay. So one of the questions or comments that came up in the last poll that we did was about student engagement. Student participation, all kinds of words popped up on the screen. And I also had been thinking about it for a question to pose to you, and that is this notion of if you build it, they will come. I'll just report that on my home campus at Johns Hopkins, we have a civic life minor. It's fabulous. And there are about 4 people who have decided to take the minor. And, you know, students show up for other events that we do. Tim Schaefer was there for our Democracy Festival just last week. But, you know, we can't necessarily get them to take the classes. We're a STEM heavy campus. I think it's probably true that social science and humanities students are more likely to take the kinds of coursework that we're talking about here. But if you have any insights from what you heard in your great research, you know, what have you heard about this notion of like getting students to participate more? You know, there's a problem of if you require the coursework, some students might be resistant and oppositional to it. On the other hand, if you don't require it, then they might not take your offerings. So what did you learn?
Yeah, so in our report, there's, I guess, tiered levels of reasons why students don't participate in this programming. The first and foremost, and I think it doesn't get discussed enough necessarily, is structural reasons, right? In addition to attending the courses, students need to get their basic needs met, and student hunger and homelessness is on the rise. And so if students aren't being fed at these events, they're not likely to go, like put simply. And also, there's just so many events going on campus at any given time that it's really hard to break through the noise and, tell students, come to our event where you're going to debate this really contentious political topic. They're like, no, thanks. I'd rather go to this concert. And then students are online a lot. Like, it's just hard to get them to, like you said, commit to things that they're not required to do. That said, I was really impressed by the range of strategies individuals take to do this work. So it ranges from really in your face to more nuanced, I think, tactics. So one could be, like Kelly mentioned earlier, what Providence College does is have these really strategically placed dialogue walls around campus where they'll place a prompt or a question, and then students can write their response or their thoughts to it. And without realizing, they're engaging in dialogue. And then the hope is that when they're exposed to more formal programming, they'll be like, oh, either subconsciously or consciously, they might make the connection and be more enticed to go. Another thing is what we see at the University of Pennsylvania is tagging courses throughout the university as related to dialogue. And so by this sense, students are engaging in dialogue, but it's related to their academic interests. So they might not necessarily, if they're a biology major, they might not necessarily go to a communications class, but if that faculty member has been trained in sort of dialogue techniques and has incorporated them into their coursework, students are learning these skills by proxy, basically. And then if they see, oh, this program has been dedicated, or tagged as according to the civic life minor, and they're interested in it, then maybe they continue their engagement. Another technique we heard about was hosting really big campus-wide events and using that as kind of an on-ramp for participation. So at the Gephardt Institute at WashU, they'll host kind of get out the vote rallies. And after students participate in these events, then they'll get kind of strategic emails a few days later being like, well, did you hear about this other event that we have going on, or this cohort program, or this course that you might consider taking? And then the hope is that students are, again, they have whet their appetite and they kind of want to engage more formally. I think it also can't be undersold how much students think about their college careers, and this is similar to my research, about their professional careers and everything that they can be doing while they're in undergrad to kind of set themselves up for success afterwards. So how can programs think about tailoring their programs in accordance with students' professional interests? So that might be if your program offers a micro-credential, it's offering a LinkedIn badge. Students want to promote that they got this micro-credential in this program. Or it might be the case that the program really explicitly frames their programming and what they offer in leadership language. So we saw this at Carnegie Mellon from Doreen Bosma, who talked about how everything she does is about dialogue and discourse, but you actually don't really see that on their webpage at all. It's really leadership framed. And she says, I know that students, they're looking for this. They want to tout this to employers later on. They want to say they participated in this leadership program, and that's kind of how I hook them, and then I get them to do the difficult dialogue and discourse work. So it really ranges from kind of in your face, get them participating, to influencing them, I would say.
It's called bait and switch.
Bait and switch.
Bait and switch.
Yeah, we're tricking them into participating. We're hypnotizing. I'm just kidding.
That's okay.
And I think, one of the other things that we learned is just the actual visibility. Like campus placement is really critical. I mean, campuses are physical spaces, and you have programs where students are walking by. I mean, they see it. They're more likely to go in. Others, are maybe placed where they're just not visible is an issue. I attended an event at UC San Diego, and, I think it was an amazing event where the students, they came, they were engaged. We had this terrific dialogue. The programming is fantastic, but it really was not front and center. It wasn't on Library Walk, I'll say, right? And so I think just being able to have the support where a campus is going to be willing to give really prime real estate to the work, I think is critical. And, making it a priority for the institution, and I think this is coming from, if there's a real culture around dialogue and the university is pushing it and the leadership is committed to it, I think students respond to those sorts of things. And I think we see them responding to all kinds of different, on a STEM campus, there's going to be plenty of engagement with STEM that they may not actually love. I don't know that students are going to it because they're really driven by, the love of whatever it is, but it's the culture of the campus.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like it should be a hard sell to the many pre-meds who are coming through Johns Hopkins, for example, that they need to have these skills. in their private conversations with maybe vaccine skeptic patients or when they're communicating to outsiders. But figuring out how to message that, I think, is really important. So speaking of politics, which was kind of in that vaccine skeptic comment, I was actually really surprised to see that politics was not as prominent on the board in that last question you did. But it's maybe my own blinkered view of the world is everything is politics. But it is not lost on any of us that this is a fraught political moment. And you are talking about getting people to talk about really hot button issues right now. We're in a moment where there's top-down pressures, obviously, that kind of militate against this kind of discourse work coming from the highest levels of the federal government. But there's also like bottom-up pressures among student activists, for example, who tend to congregate among other people who already think like they do. So they may or may not be as open to dialogue as we might like them to be. So do you have any kind of ideas for the folks in the crowd here today to help us think through how to manage these conflicting tensions?
Yeah, it's great. This project started really in earnest in the fall of 2023. So, Israel and Gaza was the focus of everyone, whether it be, a faculty member in their classroom, whether it be an entire program dedicated to responding to the sort of tension on campus. It ran through the presidential election and then the inauguration of the second Trump administration. And so at each point, we saw people trying to navigate this. I will say, this is, again, like I've already written an extremely critical book of higher ed. This is like the dialogue programs are doing amazing. Like if there's anyone handling any of this well, it's dialogue programs. I mean, they are responding with actual tools and with actual sort of motivations that are effective. I think this stuff works. What the challenge is that, or I guess the lesson that we took from this is that if you have established programs and if they're spread through a campus broadly enough, and if there's an actual cultural commitment to those practices on a campus, then you don't have to be reactive. Right? And I think that we saw them being far more effective when they're not being reactive. I think it's, if you're in a situation where you're going to have to be reactive, I think you're already in trouble in trying to handle those situations. And so, I think I like to see that everyone says all of these programs. That was the biggest thing. It's actually true. Like all of those programs need to be done. I mean, it really has to be a campus culture, and campus culture really drives people's work. It drives how students understand their place on a campus. And so this needs to be front and center on every campus if you want to be able to address a political challenge when it arises. This has its limits. We interviewed a student at UCLA, and by the time the student at UCLA was going to her peers, because she was invested in dialogue programs, and by the time she got to them, the conflict between the campus and the students was already so tense. The students did not have any interest in dialogue. They simply didn't trust that dialogue was either the commitment of the university or that it was going to get them anywhere given the circumstances. So it's, obviously dialogue is not a solution to all these problems. These things are going to happen. It's not even necessarily the most appropriate response to all political actions and demands either. And I think Chancellor Mnookin made that point clearly as well. So we shouldn't expect it to. But I do think a university is best equipped when it's really spread a culture of dialogue throughout the campus to deal with these problems. I'll just add one last thing. We can do much better at this, and this does come out of my own work elsewhere. If we really can restore public funding to higher education, this work is so much easier. We saw funding come up as a main priority. And when you have state funding, public funding for universities, they don't have to be as responsive to outside political pressures. I mean, of course, they have to deal with the state, but that's, at least you have the resources and you have the more of an ability to commit to your mission. Mm-hmm. So I think public funding is sort of that bedrock of good dialogue programming and responding to our political crises on campuses.
Hey, you heard it here first, folks. So you all saved my hide because I was out of questions, and I have a fistful of questions here, so I'm going to turn to them now. And this is also about funding. So here you go. Did any interviewees elucidate how to make the appeal for funding this work to university administration and or external funders? And what innovative financing models did you see? I don't know if this is a question so much about public funding, mm-hmm. State funding or foundation funding, but do you have any insights about that?
Just a few. I think we mentioned this in the report, and I mentioned this in the presentation briefly, but I think when you can align your programming with the university mission and strategic plan and tout that to university leadership, it pays dividends. And it makes it also so that leadership kind of can't ignore you, right? Like if you're saying like, I'm doing exactly what this university mission is stating, that's a kind of a natural conversation to flow in terms of funding. In terms of innovating finance models, I think where we heard about that the most was in the context of third-party organizations. And when universities partner with them, and they tend to be quite flexible. Well, not always, but they want to be flexible in terms of how they create these financial partnerships with universities, because they want this dialogue to work. They want these programs to be on campuses. And if they need to sort of have this sliding scale approach, at least initially, to get it off the ground, then they're willing to work with you and then to eventually build it up and get buy-in to get this work going. So I think in terms of innovation, I would encourage others to look to third-party organizations for getting this off the ground and kind of getting that more established external support, and then eventually building it up to get university leaders to put some money where their mouth is.
Okay. Different kind of question. We're in a moment when even mentioning the words racial diversity seem like, it can get you in trouble. So this question is about what amount of racial diversity did you include in your interviews with contributors, leaders, and producers?
That's a good question. And I need to go back to the data to answer it fully. I can't give like a concrete answer at the moment. We did our best with recruitment across geographic landscapes and types of institutions. And so I think I said we had 40 universities present across the United States, both rural communities, urban communities, in addition to HBCUs, R1s, small private liberal arts schools. And so I'm not sure if the question is about racial diversity of the interviewee participants themselves or of the campuses present, but we did our best to kind of cast a net wide and far in terms of how these programs might be present across campuses and across the racial diversity of types of campuses.
I mean, I'll say when we started, I think our focus tended like everybody's focus tends to do, and it went straight for the elites, right? And Dr. Pettit, the very first meeting that we had with her, she was like, this isn't going to cut it. You gotta take a much broader look at what's going on. And so we did. I mean, we interviewed people at HBCUs. We interviewed people at small Christian colleges, at, big flagship universities. We spoke to students who were conservative students. We spoke to students who were not. And so, I think we got a very diverse group of people. You're right. It's one of these things I think that, we've all, maybe not all of us, but I certainly think that we've taken it out of the front and center of always presenting our work as a image of diversity, which is maybe a mistake. But we did do our best to make sure that we had a really wide net.
I'll just say that Johns Hopkins, the institute that I'm in, had a big grant rescinded because we included diversity of thought as something that we were working on in our institute. So the degree to which things can be targeted for even that is crazy. I think I have one more question. We have time for one more question, and quickly. So what about student-led programming? Did you identify insights in this regard? Did you focus on any of that? I know Bridge USA, Sustained Dialogue are a couple of programs that I looked at that are national. Any insights there?
Yeah, and we did interview several folks from Bridge, and when we're talking about getting students engaged, having students really driving the programming is certainly one way. And there's limits, of course, I think, to like having student-led programming. So I think there's probably a way to kind of like, bridge that with the infrastructure and the expertise that universities have. But I don't know, Karina.
I think the extent we definitely focus more on programs that were faculty-led and staff-led predominantly. We spoke to a few students who do this work at like the student org level, like registered student organizations. In that sense, they'll typically have a faculty mentor, and their goal is to become kind of a faculty-led and staff-led program. But that said, there's certainly this kind of, I don't want to call it a rumbling movement, but in a sense of like Bridge USA and these chapters popping up all over the country, and their very intentional effort to like recruit students via Instagram DMs, being like, hey, do you want to start a Berkeley Bridge USA chapter, and kind of giving them opportunities to do so. But I think it's certainly a space for growth.
Okay. I think we need to wrap it up there. I still have a huge number of questions, but I just want to say, Kelly and Karina, that you passed your defense. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we made it through the day. I had the opportunity and the privilege to be with the Colorado State student facilitators. And when I was looking at building the next generation of leaders, I was wondering, is that just a hypothetical question? But now that I sat with these young leaders, I know it's actually a reality. I have a lot of optimism for the future. I'm so impressed with the young leaders and where we're moving with the next generation. It was so interesting when Karina was doing the report at the very beginning, the research paper, the impact paper, and she said, coming here, it's like a reunion. Over the last 2 years, she's reached out to, and Kelly as well, so many of you who are in the room today, and how finally everyone coming together after 2 years of research in one room, all the innovative work that you're doing, that we're really a true family. And one of the students said in our facilitated conversation, it's about moving from safe space to brave space. And I think that's really what we need to do. It's so easy to stay within our own community and our own safe space. But I think if we really want to move forward as a society on college campuses and universities, we need to shift out of that space, that safe space, to really the brave space. And I think we've done that today, and we want to continue that moving forward. So with that, I want to just thank everyone again for coming to San Diego, for sharing all of your ideas today. I want to really think about how we can all move forward. What action items, if you can leave today and think about a couple action items that you can really implement as you go back to your home cities, I think that's what it's really about. So thank you again. And on behalf of NCRC and UCSD, have a safe trip back to your own community, and good luck in the work that you're all doing. It's important work. So take care, everyone.